City planner Jane Jacobs once said that people make cities. So if you really want to understand what's going on in a city, you first need to understand its people. However, if you were to live in a place like New York, where over 8 million people, you can't really know what they're all doing all the time. So instead, it's better to look at how people are connected, or the relationships between them. In this way, instead of recording from every single individual person, you could look at a few key people and kind of infer what everyone else is doing. This is similar to a gossiper listening to one half of a phone conversation, where they can kind of infer the other half using context clues. But what does this have to do with the brain?
I'm Manuel Beiran, a postdoctoral research scientist at the Center for Theoretical Neuroscience at Columbia University. You may be wondering what that means, theoretical neuroscience. When people picture neuroscientists, they think of researchers in a lab coat, working with test tubes and living organisms, but not all neuroscientists do. Theoretical neuroscientists, like me, work with maths and computers to understand how the brain works. Remember when we talked about New York City earlier? Just like how a sociologist might want to understand New York City via its people, as neuroscientists, we want to know how the brain works via its neurons. But just like there are too many people to listen to in New York City, there are far too many neurons to record from. Instead of hearing everyone's autobiography for hours, we can just ask a leader about everyone else in the group. Similarly with the brain, if we can identify the most informative neurons, aka the key leader neurons, and record from them, we can infer the activity of the entire system.
No, it's a surprise party. You can't let him know. Yeah, I don't think John's gonna make it. He's out of town. Nathan should be able to come, but I think he's got another party that night. No, tell Varia she needs to come. I need her help setting up. Awesome. Thank you, Christina. You're so reliable.
Person 1 was able to get so much information because he eavesdropped on person 2, who is our great leader and is very well connected with everyone else. But when we look at the brain, how should we find the key leader neurons? In order to do this, scientists have been working hard to create a data set that describes how every single neuron in the brain is connected to each other. This data set is known as the connectome, and it can be used to identify the most well-connected neurons, which could be good candidates for our key leader neurons. As of now, we are far away from a full connectome for the human brain, but we have mapped out most of the fly brain, which has way fewer neurons. This was still a monumental feat, requiring scientists from around the world working together. As we've mentioned before, there are a lot of neurons in the brain, just like there are a lot of people in New York City, and their relationships form a very large and complicated network. Therefore, I developed algorithms based on mathematics and computer science tools and used the power of computers to churn through all the calculations to figure out what every neuron might be saying. With our novel method, we could make predictions on what all the neurons were saying. How could we check if we got it all right? After all, we could only record from a few neurons, so how could we know if our predictions about the rest were correct? Well, we can make up a fake brain, what we call a model, in the computer, and test our method on this fake brain. Because we built it, we know what each neuron is doing all the time. Now, we can just pretend we're running experiments and recording only from a subset of fake neurons, just like you might record from real neurons. An advantage of doing experiments on a computer is that it's cheap and quick, so we can try recording from many different subsets of our fake neurons and see how many you need to record. You might think that for a brain or a network with a larger number of neurons, you need to record from more neurons to predict the activity of the whole system. But I found out that actually the number you need doesn't depend on the network size. Instead, it depends on what the network is doing. For example, in our city metaphor, we might record from fewer people during the night because there are fewer things going on. Through the simulations, I also found that there are specific neurons that are more informative than others. So we can now tell experimentalists who work in the lab with flies, who might only be able to record from a small group of neurons at a time, which neurons would be the most valuable to record from. At the end of the day, all of this is based on equations and computer simulations. So in order to prove these theories concretely, we need to work with experimentalists to test our models. Often, we theorists work with experimentalists in a very tight loop. We take problems inspired by experimental work, tackle them with theoretical tools, developing models, which experimentalists can then test in actual biological systems. Their results give us feedback on how to improve our models and so on.
Thank you for watching this edition of Late Night Science. Stay tuned for our in-person events and please watch our other videos. And don't forget to like and subscribe.